tell him, you know, he was out of the band. You know, it wasn't easy.
When their fifth album stalled, the Dolls were convinced their label would dump them.
Every day I thought, man, I can't keep doing this.
It seemed the Goo Goos were goners. Then radio discovered a hidden jewel on a boy named Goo.
That was like the most played song of that year on radio, period.
But the pressure of following up a big hit plunged John Rzeznik into a harrowing bout of writer's block and ultimately into deep depression.
That's the one thing I really did pretty good, and now I can't do it.
After losing his parents as a teenager, music became John's life. Without it, he was lost.
I was asking, am I supposed to be a songwriter? You know, give me a sign, God, give me a sign.
It seemed John didn't have a prayer. But then, miraculously, he found salvation in the City of Angels.
When everything feels like the movies, yeah, you bleed just to know you're alive.
And I looked at Robby and just went, dude, there's no way back. We have turned another corner.
And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand.
Now, from garage band long shot to power pop sensation, the Goo Goo Dolls, the story behind the music. The summer of 1999, Las Vegas, Nevada. 10,000 screaming fans jump to their feet as the Goo Goo Dolls take the stage to kick off the biggest tour of their lives. After more than a decade in rock and roll's low-budget trenches, the band's early cult status.
20-some people working for us, and 4 buses, and 5 trucks, and moving lights. Big rock show, man.
To truly appreciate just how far the Goo Goo Dolls have come, you have to look back to the place where their long, eventful journey began. January 1986, Buffalo, New York. While blizzards blew bone-chilling winds across Lake Ontario, John Rzeznik and Robby Takac huddled in an abandoned warehouse writing and rehearsing their first songs.
There's no heat, so we used to bring in like a heater, all kind of crowd around the heater with our guitars, and, you know, there'd be like no windows, the snow would be blowing in, and no matter what happened, you know, we were just excited to be doing it.
Making music while fighting off frostbite, John and Robby formed the beginnings of a seemingly unbreakable bond.
We would hang out and talk about how we were going to conquer everything, how we were just going to kick everybody's ass and make this great music.
Though they were raised only a few miles apart, John and Robby were brought up in very different worlds.
John lived in the inner city. I grew up out in the suburbs. His parents were divorced when he was young. You know, my parents are still together 35 years later now.
Robby was an outgoing, happy-go-lucky kid, one of 2 children in a tight-knit family from a comfortable Buffalo suburb.
That was a world John wasn't all that familiar with. I remember, you know, him being sort of blown away, you know, by the fact my parents still liked each other, you know.
John was a shy and introverted boy, raised alongside 4 older sisters in this modest home on Buffalo's rough-and-tumble east side.
He was very sensitive and a nice, sweet boy. He really was. And he got kind of excluded from a lot of stuff in the neighborhood. Yeah. And beat up a lot. He did, other than at home.
John's father, Joe, was a postal clerk. His mother, Edith, was a school teacher, but always dreamed of a career in music.
She wanted to play the flute and live in New York and be a bohemian. She started wearing dashikis and Hirachi sandals and smoking weed.
John inherited his mother's love of music, so at age 11 he took up the accordion. His choice of instruments may have endeared him to the older folks in his Polish neighborhood, but the kids didn't share their enthusiasm.
That was great, man. You know, how many times can you get your ass kicked for, you know, walking home from Edwin's music store with an accordion, you know?
Growing up, John took more than his fair share of shots. His father was an alcoholic, a desperately unhappy man who often took his frustrations out on his wife and children.
Yeah, my old man came home drunk Saturday night, popped my mom in the jaw, you know, and then, and then smacked us around for a while. I mean, it's just, it happened. There was never a question of there being love in the house. There was always love, but sometimes, love comes in the form of a quick backhand, when you get online, and that's the way it is.
By the time John was 12, his mother had her fill of his father's drinking and they divorced. Joe Rzeznik's health was failing. In addition to alcoholism, he suffered from diabetes and depression. Someone needed to care for him. So rather than make him move out, Edith Rzeznik allowed Joe to move into an apartment upstairs.
He had health problems. He would slip into real deep depressions. He was sort of like talking about his own death a lot of times, I'm not going to be around. I'm not going to be around a long time. You got to learn how to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself, Johnny, because I ain't going to be around much longer.
On a cold January day, after years of neglect, Joe Rzeznik's body finally gave out. He collapsed to the floor of his apartment and slipped into a coma. A month later, on February 2nd, 1981, Joe Rzeznik died due to complications from alcohol abuse and diabetes. He was 53 years old.
We had had such a hot and cold relationship, and there was a lot of distance there. That it was kind of, I wasn't able to feel like, wow, my father, this is my father, for a long time after that. Yeah.
Because of his poor health, Joe Rzeznik's death wasn't entirely unexpected. But then, little more than a year after his passing, the family was dealt a catastrophic blow. On October 26, 1982, John awoke from a nap to discover his mother suffering a massive heart attack.
I went upstairs, I was yelling and screaming at my sisters, what the hell do we do? You got to call the ambulance. I didn't know what was going on. She was having a heart attack, and she pretty much died there, in front of us.
Within minutes, paramedics arrived and rushed John's mother to the hospital. But it was too late. Edith Rzeznik was pronounced dead on arrival. She was 51 years old.
That was the coldest day of my life, man. Coldest day of my life. I swear to God, I went to bed that night, and I had no feeling and no heat in my body. It was nothing. It was just the most devoid of any feeling I'd ever been in my life.
In just over 1 year, the Rzeznik children had lost both their parents. They were devastated. But at 16, John seemed to be the hardest hit.
I took a lot of drugs and drank a lot. I think it's pretty, like a knee-jerk reaction to a really crazy, chaotic situation. I mean, you're brought up in total chaos, and then